can you even build a successful forestry business these days without like massive debt or working crazy hours? Is it possible to, make a good living and actually enjoy what you're doing without burning out?
It is these question, isn't it? And, we hear that a lot, especially from folks in the middle of their careers, right? They're looking for more control, more flexibility, and maybe even like more meaning in their work.
Well, on this deep dive with the FBS podcast, we're going to explore something that might offer a path to that more sustainable kind of success, right? We're calling it minimalist entrepreneurship, and it's especially relevant to you guys because, as you know, the whole mission of FBS is to help people just like you, mid-career professionals who are navigating that exciting but sometimes overwhelming forestry world and all the career growth that comes with it.
And the cool thing is this minimalist entrepreneurship idea, it's not just some theory, right? It's like an actual framework. You can use it to build businesses that are profitable, that last, and you don't need a ton of resources.
Yeah, exactly. So we're drawing some inspiration here from a book by Sahil Lavingia called The Minimalist Entrepreneur. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, isn't that guy from the tech world? And yeah, you'd be right. But the core principles he talks about in the book, they actually resonate really well with forestry businesses.
Totally. For instance, Lavingia, he talks about how some of the most successful businesses out there, they're family firms, passed down for generations. They build those deep relationships with customers over like decades. And that really hit home for me because we see that same thing in forestry, that long-term focus, that commitment to the community. It's pretty powerful.
Okay, so let's break this down. What is a minimalist entrepreneur, according to this Lavingia guy?
Well, he defines it as someone who's focused on building a profitable, sustainable business. They're not chasing, crazy growth or tons of outside investment. It's more about delivering real value to the customers and creating something that, well, makes you money, sure, but it's also fulfilling.
Yeah, I love that. It's a nice change from that grow at all costs mentality you see so much in the startup world.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is, a lot of forestry businesses, they already operate this way. They're often bootstrapped, they really watch their cash flow, and they're all about providing those essential services to their community.
So, like, a lot of folks in forestry are already minimalist entrepreneurs without even knowing it. But what I thought was really interesting was Lavingia's perspective on what it means to be a creator. He doesn't limit it to, like, artists or software developers. He's talking about anyone who's creating products or solutions that meet a need, in their community.
Right. And when you think about it that way, loggers, foresters, truckers, they're all creators.
It's true. You're out there managing forests, harvesting timber, you're transporting logs. I mean, you're creating value every step of the way, right?
Yeah.
You're solving problems, making a real difference for your customers and your community too.
And that's key to what Lavingia's saying. Understanding that you're a creator, it's essential for building a business that you actually enjoy and that connects with, the people you're serving. And he also talks a lot about community too.
Oh, yeah. And he goes beyond just like thinking of your community as your market. It's more like a web of relationships.
Yeah.
Landowners, suppliers, other forestry people, even the agencies you got to work with.
Yeah.
And he says that nurturing those relationships is super important.
And it's so true for forestry. It's vital for finding work, sure, but also for riding out those ups and downs that this industry is known for, sharing knowledge, building your reputation.
Yeah. Yeah. Like they say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Right. And that's even more true in forestry. Word of mouth, a strong network, it can make all the difference.
Now, another thing Lavingia talks about is building on the expertise you already have. You don't have to be like an expert in everything to have a successful business, right? But you do need a solid foundation in at least one key area.
And again, that's something we see in forestry all the time. You might have a logger who's amazing at operating, like a harvester, or a forester who knows everything about silviculture, or a log buyer who just understands the timber market inside and out. They've built that expertise over years, and that becomes the bedrock of their business, right?
And as they grow, they can learn other parts of the business, hire people, or even collaborate with others who have those different skills.
Exactly. So it's really valuable for you to think about what your core competency is.
Right.
What are you really good at? And how can you leverage that as you're, building your business?
Now, here's where things get even more interesting. Lavingia talks about processizing your operations. I know it sounds kind of jargony, but what he means is like creating systems and workflows, things you can repeat that'll make your business run smoother.
So it's not just like reacting to stuff as it comes up. right?
Yeah.
It's about thinking ahead, streamline your operations, from
Okay.
bidding on timber sales to managing your crew to handling your finances.
And that's really important in forestry because, let's face it, you don't always have a lot of control over the prices you can charge, right?
So you got to make up for that by being as efficient as you can, keeping costs down, maximizing what you get done. And Lavingia says that having those clear processes is key to being that efficient.
He's also big on doing more with less. That's another minimalist principle. It's all about being resourceful, finding creative solutions, and not spending money you don't have to.
Which brings us to marketing.
Ew.
I know, that word makes some forestry folks kind of cringe. But Lavingia, he's some really interesting thoughts on this. He says that the whole good work speaks for itself thing. It's not always enough.
Right. He thinks even if your service is top notch, you still got to market yourself. You got to build those relationships, and show people the value you bring.
And he's not saying you need like expensive ads or some fancy agency. It's about being genuine, finding authentic ways to connect with the people you want to work with.
And that resonates in forestry, right? It's an industry built on trust and reputation.
For sure. I mean, think about it. Most of your work probably comes from word of mouth, right? Well, it's marketing. It's about exceeding expectations, making sure people know you do good work.
Lavingia also talks about fast feedback loops, which basically means you got to constantly listen to your customers and change things up based on what they need.
And let's be honest, feedback in forestry, you're going to get it whether you want it or not. Landowners, foresters, everyone's got an opinion.
It's true. The key is to be open to it. Use it to get better to make sure you're delivering the best you can.
Okay, so we've talked about profitability, community, expertise, processes, and marketing. But Lavingia also talks about building a strong team, and that's a tough one in forestry right now.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. The labor shortage is a real issue. Finding and keeping good people can feel impossible.
So what's the secret then? How do you build a team that's not just good at what they do, but they're also motivated, they stick around, and they really care about the business?
Well, Lavingia talks about being really clear about what you expect, making sure everyone knows your company values, and making sure people feel appreciated. And get this, he actually thinks salaries should be totally transparent.
Wait, really? What do you mean by that?
At his company, everyone knows how much everyone else makes. He thinks it builds trust and stops people from, speculating or getting resentful.
Wow, that's pretty different. It could have some benefits, but I can see how it could be awkward too.
Hmm.
I don't know if it would work for everyone, but the idea behind it, being open and honest with your team, that's important for every business.
Definitely. It's about building a culture of trust, mutual respect. That's key for a strong team. And it's super important in forestry, where you're often working in remote areas relying on each other for safety.
This whole salary transparency thing has got me thinking. I wonder how that would work out in forestry.
Yeah, that's a good question. Might be worth exploring. But even if you're not ready to share salaries with everyone, there are still ways to create that positive work environment.
For sure. It's about being a leader that inspires people, that motivates them, being clear about expectations, giving opportunities to grow, and genuinely caring about your employees.
And that brings us to a really cool concept that Lavingi mentions, the idea of finding your ikigai.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. That Japanese concept of finding your purpose, right? It's like where your passion, your skills, your values, and what the world needs, it's where they all come together.
Exactly. And a lot of people in forestry, they're already living that, even if they don't call it that. We're in this field because we care about the environment, we like working outdoors, we find the work itself rewarding.
That's so true. But sometimes it's hard to connect those personal things with, building a successful business.
And that's where minimalist entrepreneurship comes in,
Yeah.
right? It gives you a way to align your work with your values, to build a business that's not just about the bottom line, but it also fulfills you personally.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. We talked about those core principles of minimalist entrepreneurship and how they can apply to the challenges and opportunities of running a forestry business.
But we want to go a little deeper, right? There's this article that talks about how those principles can actually play out in the real world of forestry, logging, sawmilling, managing the forests.
Yeah, I'm excited to dig into that article. Let's see what kind of insights we can find.
Me too. I think we'll see that those seemingly simple principles, they can have a huge impact on how we approach our work and how we build our businesses. So about that article, one of the things that really struck me was how they took that whole creator idea from Lavingia and like made it specific to forestry,
Yeah, yeah, I like how they said loggers and foresters, even truckers, are creators. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's easy to forget that we're all part of something bigger when you're just focused on the day-to-day stuff.
Exactly. It's not just about, cutting down trees or hauling logs. We're managing these whole ecosystems, right?
Mm.
Providing essential resources. I mean, we're shaping the landscape. And the article really made me think about all the different ways you can make a difference in this industry.
And I thought it was interesting how they said that even just dealing with a shortage of truckers or loggers, that's an entrepreneurial opportunity. It's about seeing what your community needs and figuring out how to fill that gap, right?
Exactly. If you can provide a service that people really need, and if you're reliable, that's a recipe for success, right? And both Lavingia and that article, they both warned about getting too caught up in growing too fast, even if it means sacrificing profits.
Yeah, it's tempting, especially when you see other businesses taking off. But they're right. Slow and steady, that's how you win the race, right? It's about building something that's going to last, not just chasing quick money.
For sure. And I think that's where the minimalist approach is really smart. It makes you resourceful, You got to make every dollar count, and you focus on building something solid that can grow over time. That article also went deeper into what Lavingia said about community, how in forestry, your community's a lot bigger than just your customers.
Definitely.
Mm.
You've got landowners, suppliers,
Yeah.
other forestry professionals, agencies, heck, sometimes even your competitors,
Yeah.
right? It's this whole web of relationships that can really help you or hurt you.
And they talk about how important it is to nurture those relationships, not just for getting work, but for sharing knowledge, figuring out tough situations, building your reputation.
That reminds me of this one time
But
when,
hold on a sec. Before you tell that story, I just had a thought about that part of the article. I agree. A strong network is super important in forestry. But sometimes I wonder, if we focus too much on those same connections, maybe it could hold us back.
interesting point. You're saying maybe we need to branch out a little, go beyond our usual circles?
Exactly. Those old connections are valuable, don't get me wrong. But maybe there's room to connect with people outside of forestry, too. Find some new markets, bring in some new ideas.
I like that. It's about respecting where you came from, but also being open to new things.
Yeah.
Right. Now, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, my story. So a few years back, I was working on this timber harvest.
Wait, before you get to the story, I just remembered something else from the article. They talked about building on your existing expertise, just like Lavingia, how you don't have to be an expert at everything in the business.
Right, right. It's more about figuring out what you're really good at, your core competency,
Mhm.
and using that as the starting point, right? We
Sure.
see that all the time in forestry.
Yeah, all the time. You got the logger who can run any piece of equipment like it's an extension of their own arm, the forester who can just walk through the woods and tell you exactly what the timber's worth. You got the sawmill owner who knows how to squeeze every last bit of value out of each log. Those are the people who build successful businesses because they know their stuff, right?
And then as their business grows, they can bring in people who have those other skills or partner up with someone who's got the expertise they're missing.
Exactly. Figure out what you're good at, then build a team that can handle the rest. Okay, now back to that story. I'm dying to hear what happened with the timber harvest.
So we were talking about those systems and processes, how important they are, and that article had some great examples, from the whole forestry supply chain.
Yeah. Like they showed how process sizing, is that what Lavingia called it? They showed how it can apply to everything. Bidding on timber sales, running the logging crews, even making the sawmills run better. Each step has its own challenges, but it's always about making things repeatable and efficient.
And that goes back to, making sure you're profitable, especially when you can't always control what prices are like in this industry.
Right, exactly. Streamline things, do more with less. That's how you increase your margins. That's how you weather those market ups and downs.
The article had some good stuff about marketing too, which I thought was interesting because, well, a lot of forestry businesses, they rely on word of mouth, right? But they had some really creative ideas for showing your expertise to potential clients, building those relationships.
Yeah, I liked that too. It wasn't about slick ads or anything. They talked about things like using drones to film your work so landowners can actually see how well you're doing, the harvesting and all.
Or even just taking a potential client out to a forest you've managed, showing them around. It's about proof, right? You're not just saying you're good, you're showing it.
And they said it's important to actually ask for feedback, Be open to what your clients need. And in forestry, well, you're always getting feedback anyway.
That's for sure. Landowners, foresters, everyone's got something to say.
Mhm.
But yeah, you got to be able to take it and use it to make things better.
Speaking of feedback, what about that part about Lavingia and how he does salaries? That whole transparency thing.
You mean where everyone knows what everyone else is making? Yeah, that was pretty wild. I don't know about that one. Part of me thinks it's good, builds trust. People can talk openly.
Yeah.
But then I think, wouldn't that get kind of awkward?
Yeah, I see both sides. It's not for everyone, that's for sure. But the idea behind it, like being upfront with your team, being fair, I think everyone can learn from that.
Oh, absolutely. It's about creating that kind of environment where everyone feels respected and appreciated.
Which, brings us back to one of the coolest ideas from that article, that ikigai thing. Finding your purpose in forestry. Where your passion and skills, your values, what the world needs, it's where it all lines up.
It is a great concept.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us in forestry, we're already living it, even if we don't use that word.
Yeah.
We're here because we care about the forests. We like being outside. The work is good.
It is. And that minimalist way of thinking, it helps us tap into that even more, I think, building businesses that are successful, but also truly meaningful for us.
So we've covered a lot in this deep dive into minimalist entrepreneurship. I hope you guys are walking away with some good stuff to think about. First off, remember, you're a creator. You're building something valuable. You're making a difference.
And you don't need a ton of money or a fancy office to do it. Start small. Focus on giving your customers real value. Build those connections in your community. And hey, sometimes those limitations, they can actually spark some creative solutions,
And never stop learning. Things are always changing in forestry. So to really thrive with this minimalist mindset, you got to be ready to change with it.
So here's something to think about. What's one thing you could do in your work, or maybe a business idea you've been thinking about, where you could actually apply these minimalist principles?
How can you, as a creator in forestry, build a business that not only supports you and your family, but also lets you give back to your community, to the environment? That's worth thinking about, right? Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.
Hey, this is Steve Bick with the Forest Business School. Thanks for listening to the FBS podcast, and I hope you will subscribe. The truth is, these deep dives barely scratch the surface of some of the topics we cover in the Forest Business School programs, and the podcast is a way of reaching a wider audience. Check out my website at vtfbs.com for more information. Reach out if you want to talk about one of the FBS programs or have custom training or project needs that you'd like to discuss. Again, thanks for listening to the FBS podcast.